Hey gang, how's it going? This is Nate on the Stone. Welcome back to my channel, and today we are talking about how YouTube is moving from an enemy of free speech and free thought, which we already knew, to being an actual social Frankenstein. And it is doing that by declaring an all-out war on history. I say the name Scott Alsop, and your reaction probably is...
Who dat?
Mr. Allsop is a teacher at an international school in Romania, and when he's not in the classroom or killing vampires, because honestly, what else are you going to do at night in Romania besides kill vampires? He runs a website called MrAllsophistory, which he describes as a free history revision site. And like many people who have started their own websites, he's also created a YouTube channel where he's posted videos about history. A history channel that YouTube recently deleted. Why? Because several of Mr. Allsop's YouTube videos have featured either speeches from Adolf Hitler or clips of old BBC documentaries that actually talked about the Nazis. The reason for this deletion is because, according to YouTube, the videos featured content that, quote, promotes hatred or violence against members of a protected group, unquote. Well, yeah, that kind of comes with the territory of talking or teaching about the Nazis. And that's the point. Allsop isn't some sort of radical right-winger. He's not a fascist. He's not an authoritarian. He's not a skinhead. He's not trying to recruit people to joining his neo-Nazi party. He's a history teacher who is simply trying to teach his students and anyone else who comes to his site or YouTube channel about history. History, including 20th century history, which, unfortunately, I'm sorry if it offends you, includes the Nazis. And Allsop isn't the only teacher to have this happen to him. Richard Jones Nurzak is another British teacher who had his historical YouTube channel taken down. And the UK Guardian actually reports in a story that several history teachers have reported that their YouTube channels were also deleted, and for the same reason. The reason for this crackdown is because of the dueling banjos between Carlos Maza and Steven Crowder. I touched on this during a Rolling Stone episode, but in case you didn't see that video, here's what happened in a nutshell. Carlos Maza, who is a writer and video content creator for Vox, was trying to get Steven Crowder, the host of Louder with Crowder on the Blaze TV and here on YouTube, deplatformed for months, flagging his videos and accusing him publicly on Twitter of homophobia. YouTube responded by saying, yeah, sorry Maza, but we reviewed the videos you flagged, we've looked at your case, and Crowder didn't violate any of our community guidelines. Sorry. And then YouTube turned right around and actually demonetized Crowder's channel. YouTube also released a statement saying that, yeah, after reviewing Crowder's videos again, they decided that they needed to do more to combat hateful language that could harm creators who belong to minorities on YouTube and just people in general, and that therefore they were going to start weeding out bad content through deplatforming, demonetization, and not allowing people to actually comment on those videos. Good creators were going to be rewarded, and borderline content, and again, I'm still waiting for someone to explain to me what the hell is borderline content. If there is a line of demarcation between what is allowed by community guidelines and what is not allowed by community guidelines, as long as you stay on this side of the line, you should be good. Would be monitored and neutralized by the YouTube algorithm, pushing videos with the opposite ideas and POVs from legitimate and credible sources. And I want to reiterate a point here, gang, just to make sure that we're perfectly clear. Allsop, Nurzak, and the other historians, they didn't have just a few videos taken down from their channels. No, their whole channels were taken down. Just like that. And not for trying to recruit people to a neo-Nazi party, not for making skinhead remarks, no. Just for teaching history. Now here's the obvious problem with this, of course. If we can no longer talk or teach about the Nazis because doing that is just as hateful as actually being a Nazi or a neo-Nazi, pretty soon we're going to forget what made the Nazis so terrible to begin with. Right now, we've been so well taught and so well reminded of all the evil things that the Nazis did that their atrocities don't even have to be fully placed in front of our eyes for us to know how bad that they are. Think about this. It's interesting to see that in Raiders of the Lost Ark and in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, the Nazi antagonists, they really don't do anything all that spectacularly evil. They push people around, yell some threatening stuff in German, and burn some books and act like jerks, but we don't really see any death camps, concentration camps, torture, or anything like that. Compare that to Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom with the Thuggies, where you've got child kidnappings, child slave labor, as well as that. And that's because we don't need to see the evil things that the Nazis did. We just know that the Nazis are evil. And we know that the Nazis are evil. We know the list of their crimes because we've been taught. We've been reminded what they did. But what happens when we're not going to be allowed to remember what the Nazis thought, said, and did? Or we're not even going to be allowed to be taught what they thought, said, and did? Well, we're going to forget what they actually thought, said, and did. If you're never taught something to begin with, you're never going to know it. You can't know what you don't know. And if you were taught at one point but then aren't allowed to actually use that knowledge, you're going to forget, because knowledge that you have but don't actually utilize is going to sit and rust. Think about it this way. If you were never taught to play the piano, you're not going to be able to sit down and play the Moonlight Sonata. Ain't gonna happen. But even if you were taught to play the piano at some vague point in the past, and you actually memorized the Moonlight Sonata, and then got up from the piano bench and walked away and never came back for 20 years, when you sit back down, guess what? You're not going to be able to play the Moonlight Sonata. You're probably not even going to be able to play the piano. Personal experience talking there. And that is a very dangerous place to be, because if you don't remember the past, you're going to be doomed to repeat it. Why? Because if you don't remember the evil things that people have done in the past, which have stemmed from their ideas, then how are you actually going to stop similar actions from occurring in the here and now? Heck, how are you even going to recognize those evil ideas when they come around again? Compounding that danger is the fact that just because we remember the past doesn't mean that we're actually going to learn from it. We can completely ignore all the lessons that history has to offer us and be just as ignorant as if we had never been taught at all. But actively forgetting the past and forbidding its teaching because it's too painful is a guarantee that we're going to forget everything that it has to teach us. If this was just about the Nazis, that would be bad enough. But this is just the tip of the iceberg, gang. Since 2015, we have been inundated with the idea that anything from the past that has the potential to offend or harm anyone has to be scrubbed out of existence. First, it was basically just Confederate memorials to leaders like Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson. Then it moved to anything that was associated in any way with the Confederacy or with the antebellum South, like the statue of Silent Sam on the University of North Carolina Chapel Hill campus. Then it got to the point where even innocuous people like a songwriter like Stephen Foster or a singer like Kate Smith had to be erased from the public square because, you know, they wrote songs and works about the slave-holding South, or, oh my gosh, they sang a song in the 1930s, no less, that would probably be considered rather racially insensitive today. And now it has gotten to the point where even the father of our own country isn't safe from the erasers. Last month, George Washington High School in Northern California reported that it was going to remove a mural of Washington because students found it traumatizing. This trend puts potentially anything that has ever happened into the past on the chopping block. All someone has to say is that this offends me, that traumatizes me, that insults me, and boom, it is gone, never to be remembered. Or at least never to be spoken of again in polite society, which is pretty much the same thing, since if it's taken from the public square, who really is going to remember it? And that causes a huge problem. And not just that we're going to probably forget the lessons that need to be learned from the past. It's true that our society today really doesn't see a lot of importance in history. One piece of proof for that being the number of colleges spending a whole lot more money on STEM programs and athletics than on their humanities programs. But history is so much more than just a list of dates, names, and events to memorize to pass a test. it's actually vital for a people to exist. Dr. Francis Fukuyama has argued that a nation, a geopolitical entity inhabited by a specific people, can only be created from the inside. And the reason for that being is because the people who make up a nation have to have a common sense of identity. And this common sense of identity comes through a shared language, a shared culture, and history. And history gives us this shared sense of identity because it makes us part of the same story. History is a story because it is the flow of ideas and actions held and taken by people interacting with their environments, geography plus other ideas, other actions, and other people. And these ideas and actions of the past, they flow downstream to us, and they help form us into what we are today. Think of America, and think of some of the common values that Americans hold. Liberty under law, equality before the law, religious liberty, standing up for the underdog, independence, self-government. All these ideas actually came to us from the past by people holding on to these ideas and actually acting in accordance with those ideas and in defense of those ideas. Think of George Washington fighting the Revolution, or Frederick Douglass orating against slavery, or westward expansion, or our involvement in World War II. And the people who acted out on those ideas in their environments in what we consider the past, they had gotten those same ideas, or the germs of those ideas, from their past. In the case of the American Revolution, it was the Scottish Enlightenment, medieval scholasticism, Renaissance humanism, Roman republicanism, just to name a few sources. Long and the short of it is that all those ideas, all those actions have flowed downstream to us, and we use them, knowingly or not, for the basis of our own ideas and our own actions, and we are going to continue that process by handing on those ideas to the next generation. And because different people have held different ideas or different permutations of the same ideas in different environments, stories and therefore national identities are very different from each other. Americans and French both had revolutions that were based on liberty, equality, self-government, natural rights. Very, very different results. Where the American Revolution led to a constitution that still is in force today, and generally, for the most part, peace and prosperity, the French Revolution led to the guillotine, and then a whole laundry list of emperors, kings, republics, and more revolutions in the 19th century. Think of this idea of history as an extended family. You know that your family has a specific story, a specific history, a huge hourglass of specific people, places, ideas, events, all coming down to you. And if you have a family, or you don't right now, but if and when you do have a family, you are going to pass on that family history to your kids. A nation's history, it's the same thing, just on a bigger scale. And just like people can be adopted into an individual family, people can be adopted into a national family. It's called legal immigration and assimilation. I know that you all know that, but I felt like I had to make that point before people started accusing me in the comments of implicitly calling for an ethno-state, which is just dumb. Calling for it and just the idea of an ethno-state in general. So that means that actively trying to change history or trying to erase history, it's the same thing as trying to change a national identity. It's Alzheimer's disease, just on a national scale. And yes, I have personally known people who have suffered from Alzheimer's disease. I know what it can do to people. That's why I deliberately chose that metaphor. And that's what's really happening here, gang. I'll admit, I was naive when I first heard this story. My initial reaction was, geez, YouTube doesn't have much faith in the ideas of liberty, democracy, self-government. You know, the very ideas that were used to defeat the Nazis back in the 40s, because if they did, they wouldn't be terrified that just watching an old clip of Adolf Hitler give a speech would be enough to turn people today in the 21st century into neo-Nazis. Then I realized something. If there were no more examples of the Nazis' atrocities and tyranny, and teaching about them and talking about them was now socially taboo, then YouTube and the rest of the ideologues, they were going to be able to come in and fill that void with their ideas and examples of tyranny and bigotry and hate. Ones that are much more in line with their ideology. I mean, it's hard to say with a straight face that a baker politely refuses using a commission to make a gay wedding cake because that conflicts with his religious beliefs, or the State Department saying that the gay pride flag will not be flown alongside the American flag at our U.S. embassies during Pride Month, it's hard to say that those are examples of hate and bigotry and intolerance when a quick YouTube or Google search will be able to show you what the Nazis were doing and saying in the 30s and the 40s. But if you can actually get people to forget what the Nazis said and did. And then I realized something else. If history is a story that allows a people in a country, in a nation, to have their own personal identity, then changing that history, trying to erase certain parts of that history, is the equivalent of trying to change a people's national identity. When an extremely powerful search engine like YouTube takes it upon itself and declares what is and what isn't allowable in teaching history, when it decides what is permissible and what is not in history, it's doing far more than just censoring free speech or, putting roadblocks onto education. It's saying that it is going to decide what the national identity of a people and what a country is going to be. It is in essence declaring that it and it alone has the wisdom and the authority to decide what a people should look like, what their identity should be, and then actually take steps to mold those people, to mold that country into its own image. Instead of being a platform, instead of just being a publisher, it instead takes the role of a social Frankenstein, molding us and twisting us into its own image. Meaning that YouTube and the rest of big tech aren't just enemies of free speech and free thought, they've become an active enemy of our own identity. I know YouTube reinstated Allsop's channel and said that, well, if a channel has, historical value, they might allow it back on. That's no reason to celebrate. That's just further proof of what I'm saying. Instead, where academic research and scholarly argument, that would decide the truth of history, that would decide what the narrative and the story was, and now it's an arbitrary command from the social Frankenstein in Silicon Valley. And we're just clay in its hands. But what say you? What are some of your ideas of how we can protect our history and therefore our national identity from big tech? As always, let me know your thoughts, your ideas, your opinions down in the comment section below. Well, that about wraps up everything for right now, gang. As always, if you liked the video, whether you agreed with me or not, don't forget to show your support by giving the video a like and sharing it with your friends on Facebook, Twitter, and the other social media platforms. And if you like videos about the culture, politics, or religion, but from a different POV, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel and to ring the bell for notifications so that you will always know when I post new videos just like this every Tuesday. Videos you're not going to want to miss. As always, thank you for watching, for giving me a little bit of your time. Thank you to everyone who has already subscribed to my channel. I appreciate each and every one of you. And I will see you all again here next week, gang, on top of the stone. Ciao.